The blood-red sunset painted Olivia Whitaker's tear-stained face as she stumbled down the dusty main street of Gila City, Arizona, clutching her bruised ribs and knowing that tonight, like every night for the past 2 years of her marriage, no one would believe her when she spoke the truth about Walter Whitaker, the town's most respected businessman. It was 1878, and Gila City was booming with the promise of silver and new beginnings. For most people, anyway. For 20-year-old Olivia, the frontier town had become her prison, the wedding ring on her finger a shackle rather than a symbol of love. She had arrived as a bright-eyed bride, only to discover the charming man she'd married transformed behind closed doors into someone unrecognizable, violent, controlling, and cruel. She paused at the corner of Saguaro Street, pressing her hand against the rough wooden post of the general store to steady herself. Her honey blonde hair had come loose from its pins, and she hastily tucked it back into place, not wanting to draw attention to her disheveled appearance. She'd made that mistake before trying to tell Sheriff Dawson about Walter's rages. The sheriff had simply tipped his hat, reminded her that a man's home was his castle, and suggested she try harder not to upset her husband. "Mrs. Whitaker," a deep voice called, making her flinch. Olivia turned to see a tall figure dismounting from a chestnut horse outside the telegraph office. Isaac Callahan, the new rancher who'd purchased the old Harper place last month. She'd only seen him from a distance before, but his reputation preceded him. A former Texas Ranger turned cattle rancher, with eyes the color of a summer storm and a quiet way about him that made people listen when he spoke. "Mr. Callahan," she managed, attempting to straighten her posture despite the pain shooting through her side. "Are you all right, madam?" he asked, his brow furrowing as he took in her appearance. Though she tried to hide it, her lip was split, and no amount of hasty rearranging could conceal the bruise forming along her jawline. "I'm fine, thank you," she said automatically, the same words she'd repeated to shopkeepers, neighbors, and the doctor on the occasions when Walter's violence couldn't be hidden. "Just clumsy, I'm afraid. Took a tumble down the stairs." Something in Isaac's eyes told her he didn't believe her excuse for a second, but unlike the others, he didn't nod and look away in uncomfortable acceptance. "Those must be mighty dangerous stairs at your place," he said quietly, his gaze holding her steadily. "Seems they cause you trouble often." The simple observation, so direct, yet devoid of judgment, nearly broke her composure. No one in Gila City had ever acknowledged the pattern, the recurring accidents that plagued the banker's wife. "I should get home," she whispered, glancing nervously toward the imposing two-story house at the end of the street where Walter would be waiting, probably already in his cups and growing angrier with each minute she was late. "My husband will be expecting me." "Allow me to walk with you," Isaac said, not a question but not quite a command either. He looped his horse's reins around the hitching post and stepped closer, offering his arm with a gentleman's courtesy that seemed at odds with his rugged appearance. "That's not necessary," Olivia protested weakly, though part of her longed to accept, to delay the inevitable confrontation waiting at home. "I insist," Isaac replied, his voice firm but kind. "Getting dark and a lady shouldn't walk alone." Reluctantly, she placed her gloved hand on his proffered arm, feeling the solid strength beneath his shirt sleeve. They walked in silence for several moments, their boots raising small clouds of dust from the packed earth of the street. "New in town, aren't you, Mr. Callahan?" she asked finally, desperate to fill the silence with something other than her own fears. "Been here just over a month. Bought the old Harper place, fixing it up. Got about 60 head of cattle now, looking to expand come spring." His answers were direct and unembellished. "And you, Mrs. Whitaker?" "Been in Gila City long. 2 years, she replied, the words feeling like stones in her mouth. We moved from Boston after our wedding. Walter, my husband, he saw opportunity in the West. And what did you see? The question caught her off guard. No one had asked what she wanted or expected since she'd arrived in Arizona territory. I thought I'd see adventure, she admitted softly. A chance to build something new. I was mistaken. They had reached the wrought iron gate that fronted the Whitaker home, an ostentatious display of wealth amid the more modest buildings of Gila City. Light spilled from the downstairs windows, and Olivia's steps slowed involuntarily. "Thank you for escorting me, Mr. Callahan," she said formally, withdrawing her hand from his arm and straightening her shoulders as if preparing for battle. Isaac didn't move, his gaze fixed on the house before them. "Mrs. Whitaker," he began, then paused, choosing his words carefully. "If you ever need assistance of any kind, my ranch is just 4 miles north of town. The offer stands day or night." For a moment, Olivia couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. What was he offering? Why would this stranger, this cowboy she barely knew, extend such a gesture? "Good evening, Mr. Callahan," she finally managed, turning away before he could see the fresh tears threatening to spill. As she walked up the path to her front door, she could feel his eyes on her back, watchful, concerned. She didn't look back, couldn't bear to see pity in another person's gaze. But for the first time in 2 years, she felt something stir within her chest that she'd thought long dead. Hope. It died the moment she stepped through the door. "Where have you been?" Walter's voice sliced through the quiet of the entryway, making her freeze with her hand still on the doorknob. "Just to the mercantile, Walter," she answered, working to keep her voice steady. "We needed flour and sugar, and Mrs. Peterson was talkative today." Walter Whitaker stepped from the shadows of the parlor, his handsome features arranged in an expression of concern that might have fooled anyone who didn't know him as she did. At 38, he cut an impressive figure, tall and well-dressed, with dark hair just starting to silver at the temples. The respectable banker, civic leader, and pillar of the community. "I was worried," he said, moving toward her. His breath carried the familiar scent of whiskey, "when you didn't return promptly." "I'm sorry to have concerned you," Olivia replied carefully, clutching her basket of purchases like a shield. His gaze narrowed as it swept over her. "Who was that man? The one who walked you home?" her heart stuttered. "Mr. Callahan, the new rancher," he was being polite. Walter's hand shot out, gripping her wrist with enough force to make her gasp. "Do you take me for a fool, Olivia? I saw the way you were looking at him." "Walter, please," she whispered. "He was just being kind." "There's nothing." The first blow caught her across the cheek, snapping her head to the side. The second sent her sprawling to the floor, her purchases scattering across the polished wood. "You embarrass me," Walter hissed, standing over her, making eyes at some saddle tramp in full view of the town. "What will people think?" Olivia curled into herself, protecting her middle as best she could as Walter continued, his words cutting as deeply as his fists and boots in the minutes that followed. When it was over, when he'd exhausted himself and stormed out to his study with a fresh bottle, she lay still, tasting blood and waiting for the strength to move. Later, in the quiet of their bedroom, she dabbed at her cuts with a damp cloth, cataloging the damage in the mirror. Nothing that wouldn't heal, nothing that couldn't be explained away or covered with high collars and long sleeves. Nothing that would kill her this time. She thought of Isaac Callahan's words. "If you ever need assistance of any kind." What had he meant? Was it merely politeness, or something more? And why did it matter? She'd learned long ago that hope was a luxury she couldn't afford. Yet as she lay in bed that night, listening to Walter's snores from the chair in his study downstairs, she found herself thinking of storm-gray eyes that had seen through her lies, and wondered what it might be like to speak the truth and be believed. Morning brought sunlight streaming through lace curtains, and the familiar ritual of hiding evidence. Olivia pinned her hair carefully to cover the bruising at her temple, applied rice powder to the marks on her face, and selected a high-necked dress with long sleeves despite the Arizona heat. Walter was already gone when she ventured downstairs off to the bank early, according to the note left on the dining table. A small mercy. These mornings after were always uncomfortable, with Walter oscillating between cold silence and excessive, hollow affection. She set about her daily tasks, cleaning up the remnants of last night's violence, straightening the parlor, sweeping up the spilled flour that had scattered when her basket hit the floor. Normal, mundane activities that helped her pretend, if only for a few hours, that her life was ordinary. By mid-morning, the house was in order, and Olivia faced the prospect of her weekly shopping trip. The thought of facing the townspeople, their curious stares and politely ignored observations about her latest accident, made her stomach clench. But they needed supplies, and Walter would be furious if dinner wasn't prepared when he returned home. She pinned her straw hat securely, drew on her gloves despite the heat, and stepped out into the bright sunlight of Gila City. The town was bustling with its usual activity, the smithy ringing with the sound of hammer on anvil, children darting between buildings on unknown errands, women gossiping outside the mercantile. Olivia kept her head down as she made her way along the boardwalk, acknowledging greetings with the briefest of nods. She had almost reached the mercantile when a hand touched her elbow, making her start. Mrs. Whitaker. It was Dr. Matthews, his kind face creased with concern. "I was hoping to see you today." "Good morning, doctor," she replied, forcing a smile. "Is there something you needed?" "I thought perhaps I might check on that fall you took last week," he said carefully, his eyes taking in the fresh bruising poorly concealed by her powder. "Make sure you're healing properly." "I'm quite well, thank you," she said quickly, too quickly. "Just a bit sore, but that's to be expected." The doctor hesitated. "Olivia," he said, lowering his voice, "if there's anything you'd like to tell me, anything at all. As your physician, anything you share would be in confidence." For a brief, wild moment, she considered telling him everything about Walter's rages, the beatings, the constant fear. But then she remembered the last time she tried to confide in someone, how the pastor's wife had gently suggested she try harder to be a good, obedient wife, how the sheriff had dismissed her concerns with a wave of his hand. "There's nothing to tell, doctor," she said, her voice hollow. "Thank you for your concern." Matthews sighed, the sound heavy with defeat. "Very well. But my door is always open to you, day or night." She nodded, already turning away when the sound of hoofbeats drew their attention. Several riders were approaching down the main street, and at their head was Isaac Callahan, tall in the saddle, his hat pulled low against the morning sun. Olivia found herself unable to look away as he dismounted outside the telegraph office, his movements fluid and assured. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up, his eyes finding hers across the dusty street. His expression darkened momentarily as he took in her appearance, but he touched the brim of his hat in greeting. "New rancher, isn't he?" Dr. Matthews commented, following her gaze. "Seems a decent sort." Brought in one of his hands last week. Boy had been thrown from a horse. Callahan insisted on paying for the best care, stayed with him through the night. "Yes," Olivia murmured. "He seems kind." She watched as Isaac concluded his business at the telegraph office and began making his way across the street toward them. Her instinct was to flee, to avoid any interaction that Walter might hear about and misinterpret, but her feet remained rooted to the spot. "Mrs. Whitaker," Isaac greeted her, his eyes flickering briefly to the bruise she knew was visible despite her best efforts. "Doctor, fine morning." "Indeed it is, Mr. Callahan," Matthews replied. "What brings you to town today?" "Telegraphed about some cattle I'm looking to purchase," Isaac said, but his attention remained on Olivia. "Mrs. Whitaker, I was hoping to speak with you if you have a moment." Alarm flashed through her. "With me? Whatever for?" "I understand you're from Boston originally," he said, smoothly providing a reason that wouldn't raise eyebrows. "My sister's considering relocating there, and I'd appreciate any insights you might have. Perhaps over coffee." It was a transparent excuse, but one that gave her a socially acceptable reason to speak with him privately. Still, she hesitated, acutely aware of how such a meeting might be perceived and reported back to Walter. "I'm afraid I have errands to complete," she began, but Dr. Matthews interrupted. "I believe Olivia could spare a few minutes," he said, something knowing in his tone. "After all, it's the neighborly thing to do, sharing knowledge of one's hometown with a newcomer." Trapped by social convention, Olivia found herself nodding. "I suppose I could spare a brief moment." The small cafe next to the hotel was quiet at this hour, with only a few tables occupied. Isaac guided her to a corner table, well in view of the street windows, a considerate choice that would protect her reputation while allowing them to speak privately. Once they were seated with steaming cups before them, Isaac wasted no time with pleasantries. "Your husband did that to you," he said quietly, nodding toward the bruise on her face. It wasn't a question, and the directness of it stole her breath. For years, everyone had politely ignored the evidence, accepting her flimsy excuses without question. No one had ever simply stated the truth so plainly. "Mr. Callahan," she gasped, glancing around to ensure no one had overheard. "That's a serious accusation." "Not an accusation, madam. An observation." His eyes held her steadily. "I've seen enough violence in my time to recognize its handiwork." Olivia's fingers trembled around her coffee cup. "You're mistaken," she whispered, the denial automatic after so many repetitions. "Am I?" Isaac's voice was gentle but unyielding. "Those aren't the marks of a fall, Mrs. Whitaker. The pattern of bruising, the split lip that's trying to heal, those come from a man's fists." She lowered her gaze, unable to maintain eye contact in the face of such unvarnished truth. "What happens in my home is private," she managed finally. "Not when it involves harm coming to an innocent person," Isaac countered. "I was a Texas Ranger for 8 years before turning to ranching. I've sworn to uphold the law and protect those who can't protect themselves. I won't turn a blind eye to what's happening to you." Olivia felt tears threatening and blinked them back fiercely. "You don't understand," she said, her voice barely audible. "He's the most respected man in Gila City. No one would believe me over him. I've tried before." "I believe you," Isaac said simply, 3 words. Just 3 words, yet they hit her with the force of a physical blow. She stared at him, searching his face for any sign of mockery or deceit, finding only sincerity. "Why?" she asked finally. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," he replied. "I know that no woman deserves to live in fear. I know that the marks on your body tell a truth your words deny. And I know that if someone doesn't intervene, one day he'll go too far." The matter-of-fact way he said it, as if stating an inevitable conclusion rather than making a dire prediction, sent a chill through her. Because deep down, she'd known the same truth for months now. Walter's rages were becoming more violent, his control more tenuous. One day he would kill her. "What would you have me do?" she asked, desperation creeping into her voice. "Leave him. Where would I go? What would I live on? I have no family, no money of my own. Everything belongs to Walter." "There are options," Isaac said. "Places you could go, people who would help." "Like who?" The sheriff who told me a man has the right to discipline his wife as he sees fit. The pastor who advised me to pray harder for guidance to be a better wife. Bitterness seeped into her tone. Everyone in this town either owes Walter money or depends on his goodwill. No one will stand against him. I will, Isaac stated, his jaw set in determination. I don't owe your husband anything, Mrs. Whittaker, and I've never been one to concern myself with the goodwill of men who abuse their power or their wives. Olivia stared at him, stunned by his declaration. Why would you risk yourself for a stranger? What could you possibly gain? Isaac's expression softened slightly. Not everything in this world is about gain, Mrs. Whittaker. Sometimes it's simply about doing what's right. She wanted to believe him. Oh, how she wanted to. But years of disappointment and betrayal had taught her the danger of trust. I should go, she said, rising abruptly. I've already been away too long. Walter will be expecting me. Isaac stood as well, respect for social conventions overriding his obvious desire to continue their conversation. Think about what I've said, he urged quietly. My offer stands day or night. If you need help, my ranch is there. Thank you for the coffee, Mr. Callahan, she said formally, already retreating behind the walls she'd built for protection. And for your concern, misplaced though it may be. As she hurried from the cafe, completing her errands with mechanical efficiency, Olivia's mind raced. Isaac Callahan believed her. Without evidence beyond the marks on her body, without knowing her history or character, he had looked at her and seen the truth that everyone else chose to ignore. What would it be like, she wondered as she walked home with her purchases, to be truly safe? To live without fear, without constantly measuring her words and actions against Walter's unpredictable moods. The thought was so foreign, so impossible, that she could barely conceptualize it. Yet for the first time in years, a tiny flame of possibility had been kindled within her. As dangerous as hope might be, she couldn't quite extinguish it completely. The days that followed took on a strange, dreamlike quality for Olivia. Outwardly, nothing had changed. She still maintained the house, prepared Walter's meals, endured his moods, and made excuses for the marks he left on her body. But inwardly, something had shifted fundamentally. Isaac's words played in her mind continuously, a counterpoint to Walter's cruel assertions. She saw Isaac occasionally in town, their interactions limited to polite nods and brief greetings that wouldn't attract undue attention. But each time their eyes met, she read the same message in his. The offer still stands. Whenever you're ready. Nearly 2 weeks after their conversation in the cafe, Walter announced he would be traveling to Phoenix for business. I'll be gone 3 days, he informed her over dinner, not bothering to look up from his plate. I expect the house to be in perfect order when I return. Of course, Olivia replied, careful to keep any hint of relief from her voice. 3 days without walking on eggshells, without flinching at sudden movements. 3 days to think clearly, without fear clouding her judgment. The following morning, she stood on the porch and waved as Walter's carriage pulled away, maintaining the facade of the devoted wife until he was out of sight. Only then did she allow her shoulders to slump, exhaling a breath that felt like she'd been holding it for years. She spent the day cleaning the house thoroughly, not because Walter had demanded it, but because the physical labor helped quiet her churning thoughts. By evening, she was exhausted but calmer, her path forward becoming clearer with each passing hour. As darkness fell, Olivia sat in the parlor with a cup of tea, staring into the fire and contemplating the decision she'd made. She would leave. Not immediately. She needed preparation, supplies, some money of her own. But she would begin tonight, sorting through her belongings, deciding what few precious items she could take with her. The sound of breaking glass shattered the silence, followed by heavy footsteps in the kitchen. Olivia froze, her teacup halfway to her lips. Walter wasn't due back for 2 more days. Had his business concluded early? Or had he never left at all, merely setting a trap to test her loyalty? She rose slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Walter," she called, hating the tremor in her voice. No answer came, but the footsteps continued, moving from the kitchen toward the dining room toward her. Not Walter's familiar gait, she realized with growing alarm, but something heavier, less precise. When the figure appeared in the doorway, Olivia's blood turned to ice. It was Amos Fletcher, one of the rougher elements from the mining camp outside town. She'd seen him watching her in town sometimes, his gaze lingering too long, too intently. "Evening, Mrs. Whittaker," he slurred, clearly deep in his cups. "Thought you might be lonely with your husband away." "Mr. Fletcher," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady, "you need to leave immediately. This is highly improper." He grinned, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "Now, don't be like that. Word around town is that banker keeps you on a tight leash. Thought you might appreciate some friendlier company." He took a step toward her, and Olivia backed away, her eyes darting to the doorway behind him, her only escape route. "My husband will be home any moment," she lied. "He just stepped out to now. That ain't true," Fletcher interrupted, advancing steadily. "Everybody knows Whittaker's gone to Phoenix. Won't be back for days." His smile widened. "Plenty of time for us to get acquainted proper." Panic surged through Olivia as her back hit the wall. There was nowhere left to retreat. Fletcher was between her and any exit, and even if she screamed, the nearest neighbor was too far to hear. As he reached for her, she acted instinctively, swinging her teacup with all her strength. It shattered against his temple, hot tea and porcelain fragments momentarily stunning him. She darted past him while he was disoriented, but his hand shot out, catching her skirt and yanking her backward. She stumbled, falling hard, the wind knocked from her lungs as Fletcher loomed over her, his expression now twisted with rage. "Shouldn't have done that," he growled, wiping blood from his cheek where a shard had cut him. "Was planning to be gentle with you, but now—" His hands were reaching for her throat when the front door crashed open, splintering wood as it was kicked in with tremendous force. "Get away from her," a voice commanded, a voice Olivia recognized instantly. Isaac Callahan stood in the doorway, his revolver leveled steadily at Fletcher's head, his eyes cold as the steel in his hand. Fletcher froze, his bloodshot eyes widening as he registered the gun and the man holding it. "This ain't your business, Callahan," he said, though his voice had lost its bravado. "Just having a friendly visit with the lady." "Doesn't look friendly from where I'm standing," Isaac replied evenly. "Step back. Now." For a moment, Fletcher seemed to consider his options, his gaze darting between Isaac's unwavering gun and Olivia's prone form. Finally, self-preservation won out and he raised his hands, backing away. "Mrs. Whittaker," Isaac said, not taking his eyes off Fletcher, "are you hurt?" "No," she managed, pulling herself up shakily. "He didn't. You came in time." Isaac nodded once, then gestured with his gun. "Fletcher, you're going to walk yourself down to the sheriff's office. Breaking and entering attempted assault should keep you locked up a good while." Fletcher's face darkened. "Sheriff won't hold me on her word against mine. Everybody knows Whittaker's wife ain't right in the head makes up stories." Something dangerous flashed in Isaac's eyes. "Then he'll hold you on my word, and if he doesn't, you'll answer to me personally." He cocked the hammer of his revolver for emphasis. "I promise you won't enjoy that conversation." The threat in his voice was unmistakable, and even in his drunken state, Fletcher seemed to recognize the deadly seriousness of it. He shuffled toward the door, hands still raised. "I'll be escorting you," Isaac said, moving aside to let Fletcher pass. "Mrs. Whittaker, lock the door behind us." I'll return shortly." Once they'd gone, Olivia sank into a chair, her legs too weak to support her. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation was ebbing, leaving her shaking and nauseated. How had Isaac known to come? What stroke of providence had brought him to her door at the precise moment she needed help? True to his word, Isaac returned within half an hour, knocking politely on the door that had been hastily barricaded with a chair in lieu of the broken lock. "It's Isaac Callahan," he called, his voice a welcome sound in the silence of the house. Olivia removed the chair and opened the door, relief washing over her at the sight of him standing there, solid and real. "Fletcher's been locked up," he informed her, stepping inside at her gesture. "Sheriff wasn't happy about being disturbed at this hour, but he saw the state of your door and Fletcher's drunken condition. He'll be held at least until morning." "Thank you," Olivia said, the words wholly inadequate for what he'd done. "How did you know? Why were you here?" Isaac removed his hat, turning it in his hands. "I was riding back from checking fence lines on the north pasture. Took the road past your place and saw a figure breaking in through your kitchen window." His expression darkened. "Recognized Fletcher right away. Man's got a reputation even in the short time I've been here." He glanced at the broken door. "This won't keep anyone out tonight. I can fix it temporarily, enough to hold until morning, but—" "But I shouldn't stay here," Olivia finished for him, the reality of her situation sinking in. With Walter away and the house compromised, she was vulnerable in a way that went beyond her usual dangers. Isaac nodded. "It wouldn't be safe. Especially once word gets around town that Fletcher's been arrested here." He hesitated, then continued, "I have a suggestion if you're willing to hear it." "Please," she said, finding that she trusted his judgment more than her own at this moment. "There's a widow who keeps house for me at the ranch, Mrs. Cartwright, respectable woman, church-going. She has a spare room in her cottage on my property." He met her eyes directly. "You'd be safe there with your reputation intact until your husband returns." Olivia considered his offer. It was perfectly proper staying with an older, widowed woman rather than at the ranch house with Isaac himself. No one could object to such an arrangement under the circumstances. And yet, if Walter learns I stayed anywhere but home, even with a chaperone— She trailed off, not needing to explain the consequences. "Mrs. Whittaker Olivia," Isaac said, using her given name for the first time, his voice gentle but firm. "Your husband tried to kill you the night before he left. The bruises on your neck are still visible. Fletcher just attempted to assault you in your own home. At what point does your safety become more important than your husband's unreasonable demands?" Put so plainly, it was difficult to argue with his logic. And in truth, Olivia was terrified of spending the night alone in the house with a broken door, knowing that Fletcher had friends who might decide to finish what he'd started. "I'll need to pack a few things," she said finally. Isaac's expression softened with relief. "Of course. Take what you need. My wagon's just down the road." As Olivia gathered necessities into a small valise, a sense of unreality washed over her. Just hours ago, she'd been contemplating escape in the abstract, something to plan carefully over weeks or months. Now she was leaving her home in the middle of the night, accepting the protection of a man she barely knew, but who had already saved her twice. When she returned downstairs, Isaac had done what he could with the broken door, securing it as best as possible with a makeshift brace. "It won't stop someone determined," he warned, "but it's not obviously broken from the outside now. I'll send one of my men to properly repair it tomorrow before your husband returns." The ride to Isaac's ranch was largely silent, each lost in their own thoughts as the wagon creaked along the moonlit road. Olivia found herself studying his profile in the silver light, the strong line of his jaw, the watchful eyes that seemed to miss nothing, the capable hands that held the reins with practiced ease. "Why are you helping me?" she asked suddenly, the question that had been burning in her mind since their conversation in the cafe. Isaac was quiet for so long that she thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, "My mother was like you, beautiful, gentle-natured, married to a man who seemed perfect to everyone outside the family." His voice held a controlled tension that spoke of old, deep wounds. No one believed her when she tried to tell them what was happening, not the sheriff, not her own family. "She died when I was 14, fell down the stairs," my father said, "just like you're always falling." Olivia's throat tightened with empathy and a terrible understanding. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I was too young, too weak to save her then," Isaac continued, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "I promised myself I'd never again stand by when someone needed help, especially not someone suffering the way she did." The simple honesty of his explanation moved her deeply. This wasn't about romance or improper intentions. It was about a boy who couldn't save his mother trying to right an old wrong by saving someone else. "Your mother would be proud of the man you've become," she said softly. His hands tightened on the reins momentarily, but he made no reply beyond a slight nod of acknowledgement. They arrived at the ranch shortly before midnight. Unlike the larger cattle operations further north, Isaac's place was modest but well-maintained, a sturdy main house, a bunkhouse for his handful of cowboys, a barn, and several outbuildings. A small cottage stood a short distance from the main house, lamplight glowing in its windows despite the late hour. "Mrs. Cartwright's waiting up," Isaac explained as he helped Olivia down from the wagon. "I sent one of the boys ahead to let her know we were coming." The cottage door opened before they reached it, revealing a stout, gray-haired woman with a kind face and sharp, assessing eyes. She took in Olivia's appearance with a glance that missed nothing but showed no judgment. "Mrs. Whittaker, I presume," she said, stepping back to admit them. "I'm Agnes Cartwright. Mr. Callahan tells me you've had quite an ordeal tonight." "Yes," Olivia replied, suddenly exhausted now that she was safely away from her home. "Thank you for accommodating me on such short notice." "Nonsense," Agnes said briskly. "Any decent person would do the same. I've made up the spare room and there's hot tea waiting. You look like you could use it." Isaac lingered only long enough to ensure Olivia was settled, explaining that he would return in the morning to discuss next steps. As the door closed behind him, Olivia felt a curious mixture of relief and apprehension. For the first time in years, she was beyond Walter's reach temporarily, at least. But what would happen when he returned and found her gone? As if reading her thoughts, Agnes placed a gentle hand on her arm. "One night at a time, dear," she said. "That's all any of us can manage when the world turns upside down. Let's get some tea in you and then rest. Tomorrow's problems will wait for tomorrow." Olivia slept deeply that night, free from the hypervigilance that usually characterized her rest at home. When she woke, sunlight was streaming through unfamiliar curtains, and for a moment she couldn't place where she was. Then memory returned: Fletcher's attack, Isaac's rescue, the late-night journey to the ranch. She dressed quickly in the spare clothes she'd packed, grateful that she'd had the presence of mind to bring essentials. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Agnes bustling about the kitchen, the smell of fresh bread and coffee filling the small house. "Good morning," the older woman greeted her. "Thought you might sleep till noon, the state you were in last night." "Hungry, starving, actually," Olivia admitted, realizing she hadn't eaten since a light supper the previous evening. Agnes set a plate before her: eggs, bacon, fresh bread with butter and preserves. Simple fare but prepared with care, and more appetizing than anything Olivia had managed to eat in weeks. At home, anxiety constantly gnawed at her stomach, making meals a chore rather than a pleasure. Mr. Callahan stopped by earlier, Agnes informed her as she poured coffee. Said to tell you he's sent men to repair your door, and he'll come by to speak with you once that's done. Olivia nodded, simultaneously relieved that the practical matter was being addressed and anxious about the conversation to come. What would Isaac suggest as her next step? And more importantly, what was she prepared to do? The morning passed quietly. Agnes didn't press for details about Olivia's situation, but her manner conveyed a wordless understanding that was somehow more comforting than explicit sympathy would have been. She put Olivia to work helping with household tasks, kneading dough, peeling vegetables for the midday meal, simple, repetitive activities that soothed her jangled nerves. It was early afternoon when Isaac arrived, knocking politely before entering at Agnes's invitation. He looked tired, Olivia thought, as if he hadn't slept much after leaving them the night before. "Mrs. Whittaker," he greeted her, "I hope you rested well." "Better than I have in a long time," she admitted. "Thank you again for your help last night." Agnes tactfully excused herself to check on the laundry, leaving them alone in the small sitting room. Isaac took a seat across from Olivia, his hat in his hands, his expression serious. "Your door has been repaired," he began. "No one would know it was broken. I've also spoken with Sheriff Dawson again this morning. Fletcher's been released with a warning." Olivia tensed. "Released? But I know," Isaac said grimly, "but without evidence of what he attempted, and with his friends swearing he was merely intoxicated and mistook your house for his own, the sheriff didn't feel he could hold him." The injustice of it stung, but it wasn't surprising. Men like Fletcher rarely faced consequences for their actions against women, especially when those women had reputations as difficult or fragile as Walter had carefully cultivated for her. "I see," she said flatly. "So he's free to try again." "He won't," Isaac assured her, something cold and determined in his eyes. "I made certain he understands that any further interest in you would be unhealthy for him." Olivia didn't ask what that meant. Some things were better left unspoken. "The immediate question," Isaac continued, "is what happens now. Your husband returns tomorrow if his schedule holds. You have options, Mrs. Whittaker, though none of them are without risk." "What options?" she asked, her voice stronger than she felt. "Return home and pretend nothing happened. Wait for Walter to hear the gossip about Fletcher's arrest at our house, about me spending the night away. He'll kill me, Mr. Callahan. Perhaps not immediately, but eventually." Isaac's jaw tightened at her blunt assessment. "That's one option, yes. Return and face whatever comes. It's what most would expect you to do. And the alternatives? You could leave," he said simply. "Not just the house, but Gila City, Arizona territory. Start fresh somewhere Walter couldn't find you." The idea was simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. "How?" "I have no money of my own, no family to take me in." "I can help with money," Isaac said. "Enough to get you established somewhere new. As for family—" He hesitated. "I have a sister in Denver. She's a teacher, lives alone since her husband passed. She'd take you in until you found your feet." Olivia stared at him, stunned by the offer. "Why would you do that? Give me money, involve your sister. You barely know me." "I know enough," Isaac replied, echoing his words from their cafe conversation. "I know you're brave despite everything you've endured. I know you're kind, Mrs. Cartwright told me how you helped her all morning without complaint, despite your own troubles. And I know you deserve a chance at a life without fear." His assessment of her character, so at odds with Walter's constant criticisms, brought unexpected tears to her eyes. And your sister would welcome a stranger into her home. On your word alone, Catherine understands difficult situations, Isaac said. She'd welcome you. Olivia's mind raced with possibilities. Leave, start over, build a life of her own choosing. The freedom she'd dreamed of since realizing the terrible mistake her marriage had been. But doubt crept in, as it always did when hope threatened to take root. What if he finds me? Walter has connections, resources. He wouldn't let me go easily, not out of love, but pride. His reputation couldn't survive his wife abandoning him. Isaac leaned forward, his expression intent. There's a third option, he said quietly. One I hesitate to suggest, but it may be the only way to truly ensure your safety in the long term. What is it? We gather evidence of his abuse. Document your injuries. Collect witness statements from anyone who suspected the truth. Take it to the territorial court in Phoenix, where his influence is weaker. Petition for divorce on grounds of extreme cruelty. Divorce. The word hung in the air between them, heavy with social implications. A divorced woman faced ostracism, suspicion, limited prospects, but a divorced woman was free. Would a court grant it? Olivia asked, barely daring to hope. Even with evidence, it wouldn't be easy, Isaac admitted. The law favors husbands in most cases. But extreme cruelty is recognized as grounds in the territory and with proper documentation. He trailed off, leaving the possibility open. It would take time, Olivia said, thinking aloud. Time I'd still be living with him, enduring his violence. Not necessarily, Isaac countered. There are legal provisions for separation during proceedings, especially in cases where there's danger to one party. Olivia rose, moving to the window to gaze out at the sun-drenched ranch yard. Cowboys were moving about their afternoon tasks, horses nickered in the corral, chickens pecked in the dust, ordinary life continuing while her world tilted on its axis. I need to think, she said finally. These aren't decisions to make hastily. Isaac nodded, standing as well. Of course. You're welcome to stay here as long as you need. Agnes is happy to have the company. As he prepared to leave, Olivia was struck by a sudden realization. You've thought about this before. These options, the legal details, you didn't come up with them just now. He paused at the door, turning back to her. I've been considering how to help you since the day I saw those bruises, he admitted. I just needed you to be ready to accept the help. The simple statement, the evidence of how much thought he'd given to her welfare. A virtual stranger touched something deep within Olivia. For years, she'd been treated as an object, a possession, a burden. To be seen as a person worthy of such consideration was almost overwhelming. Thank you, she said, the words inadequate but heartfelt. Isaac nodded once, a small smile touching his lips. Rest, think, I'll return tomorrow morning. After he'd gone, Olivia sank back into her chair, mind whirling with possibilities. Leave Gila City forever, fight for divorce in the courts. Or return home and continue the precarious existence she'd known for 2 years. None were without significant risk or sacrifice. But for the first time, she had choices. Options beyond endurance. And that, she realized, was a gift beyond measure. By evening, her decision was made. She would not return to Walter, not to live under his roof as his wife. She would seek divorce with Isaac's help, and in the meantime, she would need a safe place to stay and a means of supporting herself. When Isaac returned the following morning, she met him with calm determination. I won't go back to him, she stated without preamble. Not to stay. I'll gather what belongings I can today while he's still away, and then I want to pursue divorce. Relief washed over Isaac's face. You're certain? Once this path is chosen, there's no turning back. Walter will react. Badly. I'm certain, Olivia confirmed. I'd rather face his rage once in public with witnesses and legal protection than continue enduring it in private until it kills me. Then we'll act quickly, Isaac said. I'll accompany you to your house today. You can collect your personal items, anything of value that's rightfully yours. Then we'll speak with Judge Wilson. He's retired from the bench but still practices law. He's a fair man, and importantly, he owes me a favor. The plan was set in motion with an efficiency that left little time for doubt or second thoughts. By midday, Olivia found herself back in her own home, hastily packing clothing, jewelry that had been gifts from her parents, letters, and the few mementos that held personal significance. Isaac waited in the parlor, standing guard against any unexpected return by Walter or unwelcome visitors like Fletcher. As she closed her valise, a strange sense of detachment came over her. This house, which had been both prison and sanctuary for 2 years, no longer felt real. The carefully arranged furnishings, the pretty curtains she'd sewn, the kitchen where she'd prepared countless meals, all of it seemed to belong to someone else's life. Ready? Isaac asked when she descended the stairs. 2 valises and a small trunk containing all she chose to take from her marriage. Yes, she said, surprised to find she meant it. She was ready not just to leave this house, but to leave behind the woman she'd become within its walls. The fearful, diminished version of herself that Walter had created through systematic cruelty. Judge Wilson received them in his modest home office that afternoon. An older man with shrewd eyes and a reputation for fairness, he listened without interruption as Olivia recounted the pattern of abuse, with Isaac occasionally providing corroborating observations. When she finished, the judge removed his spectacles, polishing them thoughtfully. "Mrs. Whitaker," he said finally, "what you describe constitutes grounds for divorce under territorial law. Extreme cruelty is recognized, though the burden of proof is substantial. Do you have documentation of your injuries, witness statements?" "Only my word," she admitted, "and the current bruises." No one in town would speak against Walter, even those who suspected. "I'll testify to what I've observed," Isaac interjected, "and Dr. Matthews may be willing to confirm the pattern of injuries inconsistent with her explanations." Judge Wilson nodded slowly. "It's a start, Mrs. Whitaker. I must be frank, this will be difficult. Your husband has standing in this community. He will fight the petition, likely claim you're mentally unstable, perhaps even suggest impropriety between you and Mr. Callahan here." Olivia blanched at the implication, but Isaac remained steady beside her. "However," the judge continued, "I believe in justice, even when it's inconvenient for powerful men. I'll prepare the necessary documents. In the meantime, you'll need somewhere safe to stay. The law allows for separate maintenance during proceedings. She has accommodation," Isaac assured him, "above reproach with Mrs. Cartwright as chaperone." The judge's eyebrows rose slightly, but he nodded. "Very well, I'll file the petition tomorrow. Mr. Whitaker will be served notice within days after that." He looked directly at Olivia. "Be prepared for unpleasantness, Mrs. Whitaker. Men like your husband don't surrender control easily." "I understand," she said, straightening her spine. "I'm ready." As they left the judge's office, stepping into the late afternoon sunlight, Olivia felt oddly light, as if a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. The hardest part was yet to come: Walter's reaction, the court proceedings, the social fallout, but she had taken the first step toward freedom, and that alone was a victory worth savoring. "What now?" she asked as they walked toward Isaac's wagon. "Now we prepare," he replied. "Walter will return tomorrow. He'll find you gone, the divorce petition waiting. His first instinct will be to find you, to reassert control." His expression hardened. but he won't succeed." The certainty in his voice was reassuring, but Olivia knew better than most how determined Walter could be when his pride was wounded. The coming days would test her courage in ways she could barely imagine. Yet as she glanced at the man beside her, this unlikely champion, who had believed her when no one else would, she felt something stir within her that had been dormant for too long: hope. Walter's reaction, when he was served with the divorce petition the day after his return, was exactly as Judge Wilson had predicted. Rage, disbelief, and a rapid campaign to discredit Olivia began immediately. He told anyone who would listen that his wife was mentally unstable, that she'd been seduced away from her marriage by Isaac Callahan, that the accusations of abuse were fabrications born of a disturbed mind. Many in Gila City were inclined to believe him the respected banker over the quiet, often bruised wife who'd never quite fit into frontier society. But there were others who harbored private doubts, who had noticed patterns over the years and kept silent out of deference to Walter's position. As the case progressed, preparing for its eventual hearing in Phoenix, these quiet doubts began to find voice. Dr. Matthews was the first to break ranks, providing a sworn statement documenting Olivia's injuries over the past 2 years, injuries inconsistent with the explanations given. Then came Mrs. Peterson from the Mercantile, who admitted to seeing Walter grab Olivia's arm with bruising force in the alley behind the store. The dam of silence had cracked, and truth began to seep through. Walter's fury only increased with each new statement supporting Olivia's case. He made threats against her, against Isaac, against anyone who dared testify. But Judge Wilson ensured the territorial marshal was aware of the situation, providing a layer of official protection that Walter was hesitant to challenge directly. For Olivia, the weeks following her departure were a strange mixture of terror and liberation. She stayed in Agnes Cartwright's cottage, helping with household tasks to earn her keep, gradually rediscovering the woman she'd been before marriage had beaten her into submission. The simple pleasure of speaking without calculating each word, of moving without bracing for a blow, of sleeping without fear, these were gifts she hadn't known to value until they were restored to her. Isaac was a constant presence, though always proper, always respectful of boundaries. He checked on her daily, brought news of the case's progress, ensured she had everything she needed. Sometimes they simply talked about books they'd read, places they'd seen, the small details of their lives before Gila City. In these conversations, Olivia found herself revealing parts of herself that had been hidden away for years: her love of poetry, her childhood dream of becoming a teacher, her quiet observations about the natural world around them. And she learned about Isaac, how he joined the Rangers at 18, seeking justice for his mother in protecting others, how he'd saved to buy his ranch after years of dangerous work, how he valued honesty above all other virtues. Gradually, without intention or acknowledgement, something deeper than friendship began to grow between them, a connection based on mutual respect and understanding that neither was ready to name. Walter made one attempt to force Olivia's return. 6 weeks after she'd left, he appeared at the ranch, drunk and belligerent, demanding to see his wife. Isaac intercepted him before he reached Agnes's cottage, and whatever transpired between the two men ended with Walter returning to town, subdued and notably bruised. He made no further direct approaches. When the court date in Phoenix finally arrived in late November, nearly 3 months after Olivia's departure from her marital home, the evidence against Walter was substantial. In addition to the physical abuse, financial records revealed his systematic isolation of Olivia through control of every penny. His deliberate campaign to portray her as unstable to the community, and witness statements attesting to his threatening behavior since the separation. Walter appeared in court impeccably dressed, playing the role of the concerned husband devastated by his wife's abandonment. But his carefully constructed facade crumbled under cross-examination, his temper showing through as the questioning pressed on inconsistencies in his testimony. By the final day of proceedings, even his most steadfast supporters from Gila City were shifting uncomfortably in their seats. The judge's decision, when it came, was clear. Divorce granted on grounds of extreme cruelty, with a settlement providing Olivia a portion of the marital assets enough to establish herself independently. Walter was ordered to have no contact with his former wife, a provision rarely included, but deemed necessary given the evidence of his volatile nature. As they left the courthouse, Olivia felt strangely numb. The victory she'd fought for, the freedom she'd risked everything to obtain, was finally hers. Yet the reality of it hadn't fully penetrated. She was no longer Mrs. Walter Whitaker. She was Olivia Webb once more, answerable to no one but herself. "It's over," Isaac said quietly as he helped her into the wagon for the journey back to Gila City. "You're free, free," she repeated, testing the word on her tongue. "I'm not sure I remember what that feels like." He smiled, a rare, full smile that transformed his serious face. "You'll learn again, day by day." The winter that followed was one of healing and rediscovery for Olivia. With her settlement money, she purchased a small house on the outskirts of Gila City, close enough for convenience, but far enough to avoid daily encounters with Walter. She found purpose in teaching at the town's small school 3 days a week, her childhood dream finally realized. Walter, his reputation irreparably damaged by the divorce proceedings and subsequent gossip, sold his interest in the bank and departed for San Francisco in January. His absence lifted the last shadow from Olivia's new life, allowing her to move freely about town without fear of confrontation. Through it all, Isaac remained a steady presence, respectful of her need for independence, but available whenever she needed him. Their friendship deepened through shared meals, long rides across his ranch lands, evenings spent reading by the fire in her small parlor with Agnes as chaperone. Neither spoke of the growing attachment between them, both recognizing that Olivia needed time to heal before considering any new relationship. Spring came to Arizona territory with a riot of wildflowers and warming breezes, the harsh landscape softening briefly under nature's touch. On a Sunday afternoon in early April, Isaac invited Olivia to ride with him to a particular spot on his property, a mesa overlooking the valley, where the desert bloomed in spectacular color for a few precious weeks each year. As they sat on a blanket among the flowers, the beauty of the landscape spread before them, Isaac finally spoke the words that had been building between them for months. "Olivia," he began, uncharacteristically hesitant, "I've grown to care for you deeply. More than I thought possible after all that's happened. I understand if it's too soon, if you need more time, but I wanted you to know that my feelings." "Isaac," she interrupted gently, her heart racing. "I care for you too, more than care. You believed me when no one else would. You saved my life in every way a person can be saved." He shook his head. "You saved yourself. I just provided the means." "Perhaps we saved each other," she suggested, thinking of the sadness he still carried from his mother's fate, the purpose he'd found in helping her escape a similar end. He reached for her hand, his touch warm and steady, so different from Walter's grasping, controlling grip. "I don't want to rush you. After everything you've been through, the last thing I want is to make you feel pressured." "You never have," she assured him. "From the first moment, You've given me choices, respected my decisions. That's why I trust you, why I love you." The words, once spoken, felt right, a truth she'd known for months but hadn't been ready to acknowledge. Isaac's eyes widened slightly, and then he smiled, the expression transforming his serious face. "I love you, Olivia Webb," he said, the simple declaration filled with quiet certainty. "I have since the day you finally trusted me enough to let me help you. I'll spend the rest of my life being worthy of that trust if you'll let me." "Is that a proposal, Mr. Callahan?" she asked, her voice teasing despite the tears gathering in her eyes. "It is," he confirmed, taking both her hands in his. "I'm asking if you'll marry me." "Not today, not tomorrow, whenever you're ready. I'll wait as long as you need." Olivia looked out over the valley, the land that had once seemed so harsh and unforgiving now vibrant with life and possibility. Like her, it had endured the harshness of winter and emerged transformed. "I don't want to wait," she said, turning back to him. "Life is too short and too precious now that I've found mine again. Yes, Isaac, I'll marry you." The kiss they shared was gentle but filled with promise, the first of many, the beginning of a future neither could have imagined when they'd met on that blood-red evening nearly a year before. Their wedding took place in May, a simple ceremony in Judge Wilson's garden with Agnes Cartwright, Dr. Matthews, and a few trusted friends as witnesses. Olivia wore a dress of pale blue rather than traditional white, a symbol, she told Isaac, of the new beginning rather than an extension of the past. As they exchanged vows, Olivia thought of the woman she'd been when Isaac first found her, broken, desperate, without hope. The journey from that moment to this one had been arduous, requiring courage she hadn't known she possessed. Yet here she stood, choosing freely to bind her life to another's, secure in the knowledge that this bond would strengthen rather than diminish her. "I promise to believe you," Isaac said as he slid the simple gold band onto her finger in addition to the traditional vows that brought tears to her eyes. "Always and without question." "And I promise to speak my truth," she responded, without fear and without hesitation. Their life together began on the ranch, in the main house that Isaac had been steadily improving in recent months. Agnes remained in her cottage, a beloved part of their extended family rather than an employee. The ranch flourished under their combined efforts. Isaac's practical knowledge of cattle and land management, complemented by Olivia's keen eye for business opportunities she'd observed during her marriage to a banker. Olivia continued teaching part-time, finding fulfillment in helping the children of Gila City discover the wider world through education. In the evenings, she often wrote letters to Isaac's sister Catherine in Denver, journal entries documenting her ongoing healing, and eventually, articles for women's magazines about her experiences and the legal remedies available to those in abusive marriages. Word of her case spread beyond Arizona territory, and occasionally letters arrived from women seeking advice about their own situations. Olivia answered each one, offering what guidance she could, sometimes working with Judge Wilson to provide legal information specific to different regions. It wasn't the life she'd envisioned as a girl in Boston, but it held a purpose and meaning that fulfilled her in unexpected ways. In the spring of their second year of marriage, their son was born, William Isaac Callahan, named for Olivia's father and his own. As she cradled him in her arms, Isaac beside her with wonder and love illuminating his face, Olivia reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment. "He's perfect," Isaac whispered, gently touching the infant's tiny hand, "just like his mother." "Hardly perfect," Olivia countered with a smile, "but whole, finally whole." That wholeness was her most precious achievement, not the external freedom from Walter, but the internal liberation from fear, the reclaiming of her voice and her power. Isaac had believed her story when no one else would, had helped make the abuse stop, but the true victory had been finding the courage to believe in herself again. As their family grew over the years, William joined by a sister, Eleanor, 2 years later, and eventually a youngest brother, James. The ranch expanded as well. Isaac's careful management and Olivia's strategic investments transformed it into one of the most successful operations in the territory. They built a larger home to accommodate their growing family, but kept Agnes's cottage unchanged, a reminder of the sanctuary it had provided in Olivia's darkest hour. Gila City evolved around them, the rough mining camp gradually becoming a proper town with a schoolhouse Olivia helped design, a new church, and eventually even a small library that she stocked with books ordered from back east. Walter Whitaker became a distant memory, his name rarely mentioned except when necessary to explain some aspect of history to the children when they were old enough to understand. On their 20th anniversary, Isaac surprised Olivia with a journey not back to Boston as she might have expected, but to Denver, to finally meet his sister Catherine in person after 2 decades of correspondence. The two women embraced like long-lost family, their connection immediate and profound. "He wrote to me about you from the beginning," Catherine confided as they sat together on her porch while Isaac entertained their now teenage children with stories of his ranger days. "Even before he helped you leave your husband, he said, 'I've met someone extraordinary, Cat. Someone who's enduring the unendurable with a grace that breaks my heart.'" Olivia glanced at her husband, still handsome despite the silver threading his dark hair, still the man who had seen her truth when everyone else chose blindness. "He was the extraordinary one," she said. "He risked everything to help a stranger." Catherine smiled knowingly. "He saw himself saving our mother through you," she said. "But what he found instead was the love of his life. I think that healed something in him that had been broken since we were children." That night, as they lay together in the guest room of Catherine's home, Olivia shared this insight with Isaac. "Is that true?" she asked. "Did helping me heal something in you too?" He was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing patterns on her shoulder. "Yes," he admitted finally. "For years, I carried this weight of failure that I couldn't save her, couldn't make anyone believe what was happening. When I saw you that first day, with bruises you tried so hard to hide, it was like seeing her again. I couldn't fail this time." "You didn't," she assured him, resting her palm against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "You believed me when no one else would. You gave me the strength to save myself, and in doing so, you built this beautiful life we share." "We built it together," he corrected gently. "Every day since you decided to trust me with your story." As they drifted toward sleep, wrapped in each other's arms as they had been every night for 20 years, Olivia reflected on the long journey from that blood-red sunset in Gila City to this peaceful moment in Denver. From a woman silenced by abuse to a mother, teacher, and advocate who used her voice to help others. From isolation and despair to a life rich with love and purpose. It had begun with a simple act, one person believing another's truth when the rest of the world turned away. From that single moment of faith had grown everything that mattered. Family, home, love, and a legacy of courage that would endure long after they were gone. In the darkness, Olivia smiled and held her husband closer, profoundly grateful for second chances, for unexpected heroes, and for the power of being believed.